Hey guys, how's everybody doing? Just have a listen to this. But in particular, remember, we are looking at end times prophecy. And we know at some point there's going to be a worldwide call for peace and safety. Now, I've never fully been able to understand whether that means there will be wars going on everywhere and everybody will be saying we need peace and safety, or whether it means people will be saying finally we're in peace and have safety, and then sudden destruction comes upon them. I'm not quite sure which way it goes, but you can see by what is going on in Ecuador right at this very minute, right now, that the world is preparing with all these wars and civil wars and outbreaks of fighting, etc. You can see the world is getting to a stage where the preparations are well in place for us to need to say we need peace and safety worldwide. So I'm leaning towards, I guess, that there'll be a lot of war and we'll be calling for peace and safety, not that we'll be in peace and safety. But I could be wrong, because then we look at the signing of the covenant with many, and it kind of indicates that it's signed. There is a false peace and safety for a period of years, and then sudden destruction comes upon them. But regardless, what I want to point out in this little clip is how much of a coincidence it is. Now, we've talked about coincidences recently with these eclipses, solar and lunar eclipses, with the center point of 11 January. That cannot be a coincidence. Mathematically, I doubt that we could calculate the probability of that. Something else I find very, very interesting is every single time one of these events come on, and I know this is getting into Illuminati stuff and probably things a lot of people shy away from, but every time one of these events comes on and they parade an official before a camera somewhere, there is always that triangular hand signal that they all give. You watch.
Announcement from el presidente el Ecuador.
Ecuatorianos, se acabó el tiempo en el que los condenados por narcotráfico, sicariato y el crimen organizado le dictaban al gobierno de turno qué hacer.
Now, you actually tried doing that. I've tried doing that hand signal. And you have to actually, and I play guitar, so my fingers are fairly well coordinated. You've got to actually consciously line up all your fingers and touch them together. It doesn't happen just very naturally, that sort of a stance. I'm doing it right now as I'm sitting here. To bring all your fingers together and touch them like that it's a very unnatural way of holding your hands. It feels very unnatural. Your wrists are sort of cocked on a downward angle, and it just does not feel right. To me, it would not be a normal stance. Putting your hands on your hips, crossing your hands, putting your hands in your crossing your arms, putting your hands in your pockets. That's a normal thing to do. Fidgeting fingers, but to continually make this triangle symbol. So I suspect we are right in the beginning of a countrywide false flag in Ecuador.
Lo que estamos viendo en las cárceles del país es el resultado de la decisión de enfrentarlos. Por eso, desde el gobierno hemos emprendido acciones que nos permitan recuperar el control de los centros de privación de libertad que se ha perdido en los últimos años. Y en respuesta, estos grupos narcoterroristas pretenden amedrentarnos y creen que cederemos ante sus demandas. He dado disposiciones claras y precisas a los mandos militares.
So I don't know much about Ecuador. I'm assuming that's the president over there, or the head honcho. Look at his age. He's only a young fella. I mean, he'd have to only be 30-odd. Aren't they all young these days? You know, they're all sort of from that same WEF Klaus Schwab sort of generation, aren't they? They all look the same too. All drop the same symbols and seem to have the same agendas. I notice the Watchman community seems very quiet over the last few days. I think everybody's processing that 11 January nugget that we've recently received. I don't know, you know, like it all lines up so perfectly for me, but we can't count on it 100% as a rapture date, because we've got some time around this date. We've got the January the 10th, which is I think where the 2300 days ends. But then we've also got new moon, new month, these sorts of things. And I think it was the channel called GTVE. I wouldn't even know how to pronounce that. Getvev, Getv. I don't know. Anyway, he pointed out some information whereby the way he is working it out with and he believes that the calendar's a month behind, he still comes up with the same date, which is very interesting, of January the 11th, but he points out some other things around that date too. He also points out, which I found interesting, how he believes to calculate the end of the tribulation, and then minus, I guess, the 7 years, but taking into account the Jewish calendar being out, he comes up with I think it was the very last possible day that the rapture could start was, I think, January the 24th. And don't quote me on this, you'll need to go and have a look at his video. But what I'm saying is all these different channels over the last 2 or 3 years that I've watched and commented on, and my own channel, we've all had discrepancies between us. So it's almost like there were camps, not camps of division, but there were camps that were saying we're a month off, we're 2 months off, that were operating by this calendar or that calendar. But the interesting thing about the time frame right now is the fact that they all seem to have converged. I wonder if Steve, Fletcher, Daniel Taylor, Ken Potter, any of the people that have been looking at these eclipses have done another video and taken it any further, including Garrett, the news guy. I know he supplied me with information, but he was also one of the first groups of people to start talking about this information, so maybe he's done a little bit more research on it himself. I don't know. It'd be good to see a few videos coming out today, if we could. And where are we? We're 1:16 a.m. in Jerusalem. As you can see, I go by Hobart time, even though I'm in the north of the state. Hobart's in the south of the state, but that's our capital here in Tasmania. So I'm 10:16 a.m. Jerusalem's 1:16 a.m. They're 9 hours behind us. But regardless of whether we go by sunset or midnight, they are definitively on the 10th. There aren't a lot of places in the world that aren't. There are a few. New York is still on the 9th. Central USA on the 9th. Pago, they're still a fair bit. They've only just gone past midday over there yesterday. And there's some atolls that are out there somewhere. I can't remember where. You can't find them on world clock. They're 23 hours behind. So, but nonetheless, we are definitively on the 10th in most places. A few places were still on the 9th. But we have now passed our Jan 7th watch date by a couple of days. And as I said before, overlaying time periods like the 3 days and nights Jesus was in the grave, which actually equates to 3.5 days, or 84 hours, 3.5 by 24 hours. If you started that on January 7th, then that'd bring us to Gen 11 once again. Steve Fletcher pointed out some interesting day counts of the 1260, the 1335, the 2300. Now, bear in mind that they're not those date counts. You can start them anywhere, really, because the Bible doesn't tell us where to start counting those time frames from. So Steve picked, I think, the announcement of warp speed, the COVID vaccine, as a significant start date, and Revelation 12 sign, but you could essentially apply those anywhere. So the fact that they all line up with January 11 doesn't necessarily by itself mean anything. It doesn't necessarily have any weight. But when you look at the fact that Steve applied those to significant, what he believes are significant occurrences, and they all come to Gen 11, you've got to then start to use that information as some, supportive evidence for Gen 11. So what we're looking for, obviously, is, confirmed by 2 or more witnesses. So the way when you hypothetically come up with a date is to look for supportive evidences around that date, and the more supportive evidences essentially is like having more witnesses. So that's what we're trying to do. Jan 11 is looking very good still. I'd love to hear what everybody else is thinking. But going back to what I said before, it is very interesting all of a sudden. And like, this isn't just a little event. It basically, the whole of Ecuador has... it's kind of reminiscent of Gaza, isn't it? It just sort of happened overnight. It was obviously well planned behind the scenes. It's almost like a Gaza 2.0 on a countrywide basis, but rather than being between religious or ethnic groups, it's between the government and the drug cartels. So clearly there's been a level of preparation behind this event. But anyway, there goes the old hand signal.
Militares y policiales para que intervengan en el control de las cárceles. Acabo de firmar el decreto de estado de excepción para que las Fuerzas Armadas tengan todo el respaldo político y legal en su accionar. Hago un llamado a la ciudadanía, ya que esta lucha es de todos y que también les den su respaldo. Lo que viví...
You can see there he said, I call on the citizenry. What he's basically saying there is, get out your guns. Back us up, the government. I call on the citizens to do what you've got to do. I mean, can you not see the beginning of... Well, you can't call it a civil war, really, but a war definitively between 2 factions, the government and the drug cartels. I wonder what else is going to develop in the next day or so. Anyway, like I said, keep looking up. It's by the blood of Jesus and his works and sacrifice, nothing that we've done. But we are on the 10th in Jerusalem, no matter how you look at it. Sunset or midnight. So I guess we don't have long to wait to see if there are any revelations about this January 11. However, don't be disappointed if we pass Gen 11, because if you have a look at GTVE, have a look at his channel, there are a couple of days, like 12, 13, 14, sort of, that are very significant too. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's a rapture on Jan 11. I guess it doesn't mean there's one directly after it either. but the synchronicity and the pattern with these moons, and the last video I watched had gone out to sort of 52 different eclipses. The center point for all of them is Jan 11. Now, this isn't something that Satan can set up and mess about with. He doesn't have control over the moon and the planets. He can't loosen the belt of Orion. So we know that these signs are definitively arranged by God. I find it so interesting, like I said, that we got such short warning on this. I mean, we've been looking at things for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, since 2017, since 1990 or earlier for me. Good old Barry Smith, a New Zealand pastor. We've been looking at stuff for a long time, and this has just kind of dropped on us like a bomb. Now, I know a lot of channels, Repo Man included, have alluded to the fact that they think the reason we're not working this out is because God doesn't want Satan to work this out either. However, if you have a look at biblical typology, there have been plenty of times in the Bible where God warned Satan and man about things that were going to happen. The warnings were usually fairly short. Like Joshua, I guess the people when he surrounded that Jericho, there wasn't much warning for the people inside, but there was warning. Walking around, blowing trumpets or whatever they were doing. I think it was for 7 days, wasn't it? Or am I completely messing that up? Anyway, it wouldn't surprise me if, because this information just hits so hard and fast and it seemed to have gone through the YouTube community of watchmen so quickly, it wouldn't surprise me if this was God's short warning. And it happened 3.5 days. That's when everybody started instantly talking about it. 3.5 days odd before Jan 11. That could mean nothing. I mean, I'm grabbing at straws here. I really am, to some degree. But, I want to be out of here as much as anybody else. And as the gentleman who runs this site, KLM Worldwide, says, amongst all his swearing, etc., which I find funny, actually, the way he delivers it all, as he says, watch out, America, this very thing that's happening in Ecuador is coming to us, or you, in this case. And it wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me with the way they've let so many people in through the southern borders, etc., etc., and the way these things are springing up overnight, like Gaza, this one. It wouldn't surprise me if overnight something drastic went down in the United States, and it could happen at any moment, particularly with so much tension over the Palestinian-Israeli debate, so to speak. There's clearly been a fence erected there, and people are definitely on one side of it or the other. So anyway, I just encourage everybody to keep looking up. Any watchmen that are out there that think, maybe I'll wait a day or so before I do a video, I encourage you to throw one out anyway. Just keep everybody encouraged. Let people know what you're thinking. And, hope to see you all soon. God bless everybody. Remember, give it all to Jesus. He's the one who did it, not us.